The key was still under the third flower pot from the left, exactly where it had been for the past 25 years. Some things never change, I thought as I lifted the ceramic sunflower and felt the familiar weight of cold metal against my palm. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was sneaking into my own childhood home like a teenager breaking curfew, but Mom had always been a light sleeper, and I wanted to surprise her with the anniversary cake I'd spent 3 hours decorating. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. David was supposed to be in Chicago until Thursday. His quarterly sales conference always ran late, and he'd texted me that morning complaining about another mandatory team dinner. Miss you already, babe. Can't wait to be home and hear all about your visit with your mom. Love you. The message still glowed on my phone screen as I quietly turned the key in the lock that had welcomed me home 1,000 times before. The living room was dark except for the soft glow of the television, volume turned low. Mom must have fallen asleep watching her evening shows again. At 62, she claimed she needed less sleep than ever, but I'd been finding her dozed off in front of the TV more often during my visits. The familiar scent of her lavender air freshener mixed with something else, something that made me pause in the entryway with the cake box balanced carefully in my hands. It was cologne. Men's cologne. Expensive, musky, with notes of cedar and something sharp that cut through the lavender like a knife through silk. My stomach clenched with a sudden, inexplicable dread. Mom didn't date. She'd made that clear after Dad's funeral 3 years ago. One great love is enough for any lifetime, she'd said, clutching his wedding ring that she still wore on a chain around her neck. I'm not interested in trying to replace perfection. I set the cake box on the entryway table, my hands suddenly unsteady. The logical part of my brain offered reasonable explanations. Maybe she'd had a repairman over earlier. Maybe her neighbor Bill had stopped by to fix the leaky faucet she'd mentioned last week. Maybe she'd bought a new candle or air freshener. But logic couldn't explain why my heart was hammering against my ribs like a bird trapped in a cage. The television cast dancing shadows across the walls as I moved deeper into the house, my footsteps muffled by the thick carpet Mom had installed 2 summers ago. It's easier on my knees, she'd explained, though she moved with the same graceful energy she'd possessed my entire life. The house felt different in the darkness, larger somehow, full of spaces that seemed to breathe with secrets. I could hear something now, barely audible above the quiet murmur of the late-night talk show, a sound that made my blood turn to ice water in my veins. Low voices, intimate and hushed, coming from upstairs. From Mom's bedroom. The bedroom she'd shared with Dad for 35 years. The room where she'd raised me to believe that love was sacred, that marriage was a promise you kept no matter what storms tried to shake your foundation. My feet carried me toward the staircase without conscious thought, each step on the familiar runner causing a soft creak that sounded like gunshots in the silence. Halfway up, I could make out words, fragments of conversation that drifted down like poisonous snowflakes. Can't keep doing this. Mom's voice, but softer than I'd ever heard it, vulnerable in a way that made my chest tight. I know, but she'll never have to find out. A man's voice, deep and familiar in a way that made my soul start to fracture before my mind could catch up. I reached the top of the stairs on legs that felt like they belonged to someone else. The hallway stretched before me, the same hallway where I'd learned to walk, where I'd raced my cousins during family gatherings, where I'd sat cross-legged on the floor as a teenager pouring my heart out to Mom about my first heartbreak. The door to her bedroom was slightly ajar, spilling a slice of warm light into the corridor like a blade cutting through my childhood. I pressed myself against the wall, my hands flat against the cool wallpaper with its faded roses that Mom had refused to change because it reminds me of your grandmother's house. Through the gap in the door, I could see movement, shadows playing against the far wall in a dance that my mind refused to process. Anna's going to visit tomorrow. She always comes on Sundays. Mom's voice again, and hearing my own name spoken in this context felt like being slapped with a frozen hand. Then we'll be more careful. We always are. The voice hit me like a physical blow, driving the air from my lungs and leaving me gasping silently against the wall. I knew that voice better than my own. I'd been listening to it say good morning and I love you for the past 8 years. I'd heard it promise to love, honor, and cherish me in front of 200 wedding guests. I'd heard it whisper my name in the darkness of our bedroom, seen those lips form the words, "Till death do us part," with what I'd believed was complete sincerity. David. My husband David was in my mother's bedroom at 11:30 on a Sunday night, speaking in the intimate tones of someone who had been here before, many times before. The world tilted sideways, and I had to grip the wall to keep from falling. 8 years of marriage. 8 years of Sunday dinners at this house, of David charming my mother with his easy laugh and thoughtful gifts. 8 years of him insisting we move closer to her after Dad died because family is everything, Anna. We need to take care of the people we love. How long? The question screamed through my mind like a siren. How long had they been taking care of each other while I brought casseroles and anniversary cakes? While I worried about Mom being lonely? While I encouraged David to spend time with her because I thought it showed what a caring son-in-law he was. I thought about last Christmas, when I'd found them laughing together in the kitchen while I was wrapping gifts in the living room. "Just sharing old stories," David had said when I asked what was so funny. "Your mom has the best sense of humor." I'd felt a warm glow of happiness that the two most important people in my life got along so well. I thought about Mom's sudden interest in going to the gym 6 months ago, how she'd started wearing makeup to the grocery store, how she'd bought new clothes and had her hair styled differently. "I'm rediscovering myself," she'd told me with a brightness I'd attributed to healthy grief processing. "Your father wouldn't want me to stop living." I thought about David's mysterious work trips that had increased in frequency over the past year. The conference in Chicago that had been moved up by 3 days. The client dinners that ran so late he'd just stay at a hotel rather than drive home. The way he'd stopped talking about his day, stopped sharing the little details that couples share when their lives are genuinely intertwined. Every memory was reshaping itself in real time, innocent moments transforming into something ugly and deliberate. The surprise weekend getaway David had planned for my birthday last month, had it been to get me out of the house so he could be here? The expensive necklace Mom had been wearing lately, the one she claimed was a gift to herself, had David bought it for her with money from our joint account? My phone buzzed in my pocket, and I nearly cried out from the shock of it. With trembling fingers, I pulled it out to see a text message from David, time-stamped just 2 minutes ago. "Stuck in another late meeting. These Chicago clients are brutal. Probably won't be able to call tonight. Dream of me. Love you more than you know." The casual cruelty of it stole what was left of my breath. He was lying to me while literally in bed with my mother, sending sweet messages while betraying every promise he'd ever made. The phone felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds in my shaking hand. I heard movement from the bedroom, the rustle of sheets and low murmurs that suggested they were settling in for the night. The realization that this wasn't a moment of weakness, wasn't a terrible mistake that had happened once, crashed over me like a wave. This was a routine. They had a routine. David had probably spent dozens of nights in the bed where my father had slept for 35 years, where I'd crawled in during thunderstorms as a child, where Mom had comforted me through every heartbreak except this one. The anger when it came was so pure and hot that it cleared my head like a splash of cold water. I backed away from the door, moving with the careful silence of someone who had played hide-and-seek in this house for decades. I knew which floorboards creaked, which steps groaned under pressure, how to move through these rooms like a ghost. Downstairs, I retrieved the anniversary cake from the entryway table. The beautiful script across the top read, "Happy 3rd anniversary, Mom and Dad. Love always, Anna." 3 years since Dad's death. 3 years of supporting Mom through her grief, of bringing meals and comfort, of encouraging her to live life fully again. The sweet irony of it made me want to laugh and scream at the same time. I left the cake on the kitchen counter where she'd find it in the morning, a cheerful reminder of her devoted daughter's love sitting in the same kitchen where she'd planned her betrayal. Then I let myself out the back door, the same door I'd used to sneak out for teenage adventures, and walked to my car with the careful, measured steps of someone trying not to run screaming into the night. The drive home was a blur of streetlights and stop signs that I barely registered. My body moved through the familiar motions while my mind struggled to process the magnitude of what I'd discovered. I'd lost my husband and my mother in the space of 10 minutes, and somehow I was still breathing, still functioning, still following traffic laws like a normal person whose entire world hadn't just imploded. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Our house, David's and mine, sat in darkness when I pulled into the driveway. The automatic garage door opener seemed unnaturally loud in the quiet neighborhood as it rumbled open to reveal David's empty parking space. The space he was supposed to be occupying if he'd actually been in Chicago, instead of 20 minutes away in my childhood bed. Inside, everything looked exactly as I'd left it that morning. My coffee cup sat in the sink, abandoned in my rush to get the cake decorated and delivered. David's reading glasses were folded neatly on the kitchen counter, next to a stack of unopened mail. The throw pillows on the couch were arranged just the way he liked them, corners perfectly aligned. It was the picture of domestic normalcy, a snapshot of a marriage that had apparently been a lie for God knows how long. I walked through our home like a stranger, seeing everything with new eyes. The wedding photos lining the hallway. Had he already been thinking about Mom when we posed for those? The anniversary gift he'd given me last year, an expensive watch that had seemed oddly impersonal at the time, had he bought something similar for her? The king-sized bed we'd chosen together, the one where he'd held me through my father's funeral, where he'd whispered promises about growing old together. How many times had he left it to drive to Mom's house? In our bedroom, I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at my reflection in the dresser mirror. I looked exactly the same as I had 12 hours ago, when I'd kissed David goodbye and told him to have a safe trip. Same brown hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, same green eyes, same smile lines from 8 years of what I'd thought was genuine happiness. But the woman looking back at me was a stranger, someone whose life had been built on foundations of sand. I thought about calling someone, but who? My best friend Sarah would be asleep, and this wasn't the kind of news you delivered in a middle-of-the-night phone call. My sister lived in Portland, 3 time zones away, and had never particularly liked David anyway. "He's too smooth," she'd said after meeting him, "like a politician. I don't trust people who are that charming." I'd defended him, accused her of being cynical, told her she'd understand when she met someone as wonderful as David. My father was the person I would have called. Dad, who'd loved David like a son, who'd walked me down the aisle with tears in his eyes and told me he'd never seen me happier. Dad, who'd made David promise to take care of his girls after he was gone. The bitter irony wasn't lost on me that David had kept that promise in the most twisted way possible. I opened my laptop and found myself staring at the cursor blinking in a new document. For no reason I could articulate, I began to type, "David is having an affair with my mother." The words looked impossible on the screen, like a sentence in a foreign language. I deleted it and tried again. I caught my husband in bed with my mom. Still wrong. Too simple. Too clean. It didn't capture the way my entire history was rewriting itself. The way every memory was now suspect. The way my identity as a daughter and wife had been shattered simultaneously. Tonight I discovered that the 2 people I trusted most in the world have been betraying me together. Better. I saved the document and closed the laptop, though I had no idea why I'd felt compelled to document this moment. Maybe because it felt too surreal to be real, and writing it down made it solid, undeniable. I lay back on our bed, still fully clothed, and stared at the ceiling. David's pillow smelled like his shampoo, the same cedar and mint scent he'd used since we started dating. I wondered if Mom had requested he use something different when he was with her, or if she'd grown to love the smell of my husband's hair products on her own sheets. The questions came in waves, each one more painful than the last. When did it start? Was it before Dad's funeral or after? Had they comforted each other in grief and let it grow into something else? Or had they been circling each other with secret desires for years? Did Dad know? Had he died suspecting that his wife and son-in-law were capable of this level of betrayal? I thought about the funeral, how David had held me while I sobbed, how he'd taken charge of the arrangements when I couldn't function, how he'd stayed close to Mom during the reception, making sure she ate something, bringing her tissues, being the perfect grieving son-in-law. Had they looked at each other across Dad's casket and felt the first stirrings of whatever this was? The thought made me physically sick. My phone buzzed with another text from David. Hope you had a good day with your mom. Can't wait to hear all about it when I get home. Sweet dreams. Beautiful. The casual endearment that had always made me smile now felt like a mockery. I turned the phone face down and closed my eyes, but sleep was impossible. My mind kept circling back to that slice of light under Mom's bedroom door, to the sound of their voices tangled together in intimate conversation, to the way David had said my name like it was an obstacle to be navigated rather than a person to be protected. I must have dozed fitfully, because I woke with a start to sunlight streaming through the bedroom windows. My first thought was that I'd had the most vivid, horrible nightmare of my life. My second thought, as the events came flooding back, was that I was living in a nightmare now. My phone showed 7 missed calls from David and 3 increasingly frantic text messages. Anna, where are you? I came home early and you're not here. Your car's here but you're not answering. I'm getting worried. Please call me back. I'm about to call the police. I checked the time, 9:47 a.m. He must have left Mom's house early, maybe before dawn, to maintain his cover story about being in Chicago. The thoroughness of their deception was breathtaking. They'd thought of everything, except the possibility that their victim might show up unannounced with an anniversary cake. I found David in the kitchen, pacing with his phone pressed to his ear. He still wore the clothes I'd seen scattered on Mom's bedroom floor the night before, jeans and the blue button-down shirt I'd bought him for his birthday. His hair was messed from sleep, and there were faint marks on his neck that might have been shadows or might have been something else entirely. Anna! He dropped the phone and rushed toward me, reaching out like he was going to embrace me. Thank God, I was so worried. Where were you? I tried calling. I stepped back, putting the kitchen island between us. Chicago, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. I thought you were in Chicago. Something flickered across his face, too quick to interpret. I caught an earlier flight. The meetings ended sooner than expected. Where were you? Your car was here, but I went for a walk. The lie came easily, and I realized I was already learning to speak his language. Couldn't sleep. Ended up walking further than I planned. Relief flooded his features, and he tried to smile. You scared me. I thought something had happened. You know how my mind goes to worst-case scenarios. I stared at him across the kitchen island, this man I'd promised to love forever, and marveled at how easily the lies rolled off his tongue. He looked exactly the same as always. Same dark hair with the streak of early gray at his temples that I'd always found distinguished. Same brown eyes that had convinced me he was incapable of deception. Same hands that had signed our marriage certificate and apparently learned their way around my mother's body. How was Chicago? I asked, genuinely curious to see how far he'd take this. Boring. You know how these conferences are? Endless presentations about market penetration and customer retention strategies. He moved around the island toward me, and I had to fight the urge to run. I missed you. Miss this. He gestured at the kitchen, at the normalcy we'd built together that was now revealed to be as substantial as smoke. I missed you too, I said, because it was true in the most devastating way possible. I missed the David I'd thought I married, the man who didn't exist and maybe never had. He reached for me again, and this time I let him pull me into his arms. He smelled like Mom's lavender air freshener beneath his usual cologne, and I had to bite my tongue to keep from gagging. His lips found mine in a kiss that tasted like betrayal and lies, and I kissed him back because I needed time to think, time to plan, time to figure out how to navigate this new reality where everything I'd believed about my life was fiction. I love you, he whispered against my hair, and the words that had once been my anchor now felt like poison being injected directly into my bloodstream. I love you too, I whispered back, and wondered if he could taste the lie on my lips the way I could taste his. We moved through the morning routine like actors in a play, discussing what to have for breakfast, whether the lawn needed mowing, if we should start planning our vacation for next month. David was particularly attentive, making my coffee the way I liked it, asking about my visit with Mom, expressing concern that I looked tired. You should take it easy today, he said. stroking my hair with the same hands that had touched my mother. Maybe we could have a quiet day at home, just the two of us. The irony was suffocating. After a night with my mother, he wanted to spend quality time with his wife. Maybe this was how he managed his guilt, by being extra loving to me afterward. Or maybe he was ensuring I stayed close to home while he figured out how to continue his deception now that his business trip was over a day early. Actually, I said, surprised by how normal my voice sounded, I should probably check on Mom today. Make sure she found the cake I left for her. David's coffee cup paused halfway to his lips. Cake? For Dad's anniversary. I made that chocolate cake she loves and dropped it off last night. I watched his face carefully, looking for any sign that he knew I'd been there, that he'd seen or heard something that would expose me. But David was as good a liar as he was an actor. His expression showed nothing but mild interest. That was thoughtful of you. I'm sure she appreciated it. I hope so. She seemed tired lately. I worry about her being alone in that big house. She's stronger than you think, David said, and there was something in his tone that made my skin crawl. Your mom has always been good at taking care of herself. I excused myself to shower, claiming I felt grimy from my early morning walk. Under the hot water, I scrubbed my skin until it was red and raw, trying to wash away the feeling of David's hands on me, the taste of his lies, the knowledge that was now carved into my bones like a cancer. In the mirror, I looked for signs that I was different, that the betrayal showed somehow in my face. But I looked exactly the same, which seemed impossible. How could your entire world shift and leave no mark? How could you discover that your life was a lie and still have the same green eyes, the same scattered freckles, the same small scar on your chin from falling off your bike when you were 7? I dressed carefully, choosing clothes that made me feel strong. Dark jeans, a fitted black sweater, boots that gave me an extra 2 inches of height. If I was going to confront the destruction of my life, I wanted to look like someone who could handle it. David was in his office when I came downstairs, door closed, voice low as he spoke on the phone. I pressed my ear to the door and caught fragments. Can't keep meeting like this. And need to be more careful. He was talking to her. To my mother. Planning their next move. Probably figuring out how to maintain their affair now that his cover story had fallen apart. The casual efficiency of it took my breath away. They weren't consumed by guilt or wrestling with the magnitude of their betrayal. They were problem-solving, adapting, making sure the show could go on. I grabbed my keys and headed for the door, calling out that I was going to see Mom. David's office door opened immediately. Want me to come with you? He asked, and the eager way he said it confirmed everything I'd suspected. No, this is daughter time. Girl talk, you know? His relief was palpable. Of course. Tell her I said hello. The 15-minute drive to Mom's house felt like traveling through a time warp. Every landmark looked the same. The coffee shop where we'd had our weekly breakfast dates, the park where she'd taught me to ride a bike, the intersection where she'd picked me up after my first heartbreak and taken me for ice cream instead of asking questions. But everything was different now because I was different. I wasn't the beloved daughter driving to check on her widowed mother. I was a woman who'd lost her husband and her mother in one devastating night, someone whose family had been revealed as an elaborate fraud. Mom's house looked exactly as it had the night before, peaceful and welcoming in the afternoon sunlight. The flower pots were lined up perfectly on the front steps. The lawn was freshly mowed, and someone had tied a cheerful yellow ribbon around the oak tree in the front yard. It was the picture of suburban tranquility, a house where nothing bad could ever happen. I used my key again, calling out as I entered. Mom? It's Anna. She appeared from the kitchen wearing a flowing sundress I'd never seen before, her hair styled in loose waves that took years off her face. She looked radiant, glowing with the kind of happiness I hadn't seen since before Dad got sick. Now I knew why. Sweetheart. She embraced me warmly, and I caught the scent of expensive perfume mixed with something else, something that smelled like David's shampoo. What a wonderful surprise. I found your beautiful cake this morning. You didn't have to do that. I wanted to, I said, stepping back to study her face. She looked like my mother, same blue eyes and soft smile, same hands that had braided my hair and bandaged my scraped knees. But she was a stranger too, someone capable of sleeping with her daughter's husband while accepting anniversary cakes and expressions of love. Come sit, she said, leading me toward the living room. I'll make us some tea. I want to hear all about how things are going with you and David. The casual cruelty of it stole my breath. She wanted to hear about my marriage while conducting an affair that was destroying it. She wanted to play the role of caring mother while systematically dismantling my life. I followed her into the kitchen and watched her move through the familiar routine of making tea, the same ritual we'd shared countless times. But now I noticed new things. The way she hummed under her breath, like someone with a secret, the expensive jewelry she was wearing on a Tuesday afternoon, the subtle changes in her appearance that spoke of someone trying to look younger, more attractive. You look different, I said as she arranged cookies on a plate. Happy. She blushed, actually blushed, like a teenager with a crush. I've been taking better care of myself lately. Your father always said I was most beautiful when I was happy. The mention of Dad in this context made my stomach turn. He did say that. He loved seeing you smile. He'd want me to keep living, she said, and there was a defensive note in her voice that hadn't been there before. He'd want me to find joy wherever I could. I wondered if she'd use the same justification when she first let David touch her, when she first kissed him, when she first invited him into the bed she'd shared with my father. Had she convinced herself that Dad would approve of her finding happiness with her son-in-law? We settled in the living room with our tea, and Mom launched into cheerful chatter about her book club, her garden, the neighbor's new puppy. She was performing normalcy with the same skill David had demonstrated that morning, and I realized they'd probably practiced this, planned what they'd say, and how they'd act to maintain the illusion of innocent family relationships. How's David? She asked eventually, and I watched her face carefully as she said his name. Good. Busy with work. He had a conference in Chicago this week. Oh, that's right. You mentioned that. How did it go? She was fishing, trying to figure out if David had maintained his cover story, if their deception was still intact. The calculation behind the question made me want to scream. He came home early, I said, watching for her reaction. The meetings ended sooner than expected. Something flickered across her face. Disappointment? Relief? Fear? It was gone too quickly to interpret, but it confirmed that she knew exactly where David was supposed to be and when. That's nice. I bet you were happy to see him. Very happy, I said, and meant it in a way she couldn't possibly understand. I was happy to see David because his presence had confirmed everything I'd witnessed the night before, had proven that my marriage was built on lies and my mother was capable of betrayals I'd never imagined. We finished our tea while Mom told me about her latest book club selection, a romance novel about second chances and finding love later in life. The irony was so thick I could taste it, but she seemed oblivious to the parallels between her reading material and her real life. I should go, I said finally, standing to leave. David's making dinner tonight. How wonderful. You're so lucky to have found such a caring husband. The words hit me like a slap, and I had to grip the arm of the chair to keep from falling. Lucky. She thought I was lucky to be married to the man she was sleeping with, the man who was destroying our family while playing the role of devoted son-in-law. She walked me to the door, chattering about planning a family barbecue for the following weekend. It's been too long since we all spent time together, she said, and I wondered if she was looking forward to having David and me in the same space, so she could watch him choose between us, so she could savor the secret knowledge that she was winning a competition I didn't even know I was in. I drove home in a daze, my mind spinning with questions and possibilities. How long could they maintain this? How many more family dinners would I sit through, watching them perform their innocent relationships while knowing the truth? How many more nights would David lie beside me while thinking about my mother? How many more times would Mom hug me and tell me she loved me while systematically destroying my life? But beneath the questions and the pain, something else was growing. Something cold and sharp and purposeful. They thought they were so clever, so careful, so in control of their narrative. They thought I was the naive daughter and trusting wife who would never suspect, never question, never fight back. They had no idea who they were dealing with. I was my father's daughter, and he'd raised me to be stronger than they imagined. I was a woman who'd built a successful career, who'd survived heartbreak before, who'd learned that sometimes the people you love most are capable of hurting you in ways you never saw coming. David and Mom thought they held all the cards, thought they were the ones writing this story. But they'd made a crucial mistake. They'd underestimated me. And that was going to be their downfall. The first thing I did was create a timeline. Not the emotional kind that therapists recommend for processing trauma, but a cold, methodical accounting of facts and dates that would help me understand the scope of their deception. I sat at my kitchen table with a yellow legal pad and began reconstructing the past year, month by month, looking for patterns I'd been too trusting to notice. January. David's first overnight business trip since Dad's funeral. He'd claimed it was a last-minute client emergency, but now I remembered how he'd seemed almost excited about it. Not stressed like he usually was when work interfered with our plans. That same week, Mom had started going to grief counseling sessions on Thursday evenings. Except now I wondered if those sessions had ever existed. February. Mom had mentioned wanting to redecorate Dad's study, maybe turn it into a reading room. David had immediately volunteered to help, spending 3 consecutive Saturdays at her house while I worked overtime on a project deadline. They'd transformed the space together, creating something beautiful and new, while I praised David for being so supportive during Mom's healing process. March. The weekend I'd gotten food poisoning and couldn't make our usual Sunday dinner. David had insisted on going anyway, claiming Mom needed the company and he'd bring me back soup. He'd returned 4 hours later with takeout from a restaurant across town, saying they'd decided to get out of the house for a change. Now I realized those 4 hours hadn't been spent at a restaurant. April. Mom's sudden interest in yoga classes that met 3 times a week. David had started going to the gym during the exact same time slots, claiming he needed to get back in shape. I'd been proud of them both for taking care of their health, never imagining they were coordinating their schedules to create opportunities. The list grew longer as I worked backward through the months, each innocent memory revealing itself to be another carefully orchestrated deception. They'd been planning this, timing it, building a relationship right under my nose, while I applauded their bond as a wonderful example of family closeness. The phone rang, interrupting my documentation. David's name appeared on the screen, and I stared at it for 3 rings before answering. "Hey, beautiful, how's your mom doing?" The casual way he said it, like he hadn't been in her bed 12 hours earlier, like he hadn't whispered her name in the darkness while his wife slept alone at home, made my hands shake with rage. "She's good. Really good, actually. Seemed happier than I've seen her in a long time." "That's wonderful. She deserves to be happy after everything she's been through." I closed my eyes and counted to 5, fighting the urge to scream that he had no idea what she'd been through, because he was the one putting her through it. Instead, I said, "She mentioned something interesting about starting a new routine. Evening activities that are helping her feel more alive." There was a pause, just a heartbeat of silence that confirmed he knew exactly what Mom's evening activities involved. "That's great. Staying active is important for mental health." "Absolutely. She seems to have found something that really energizes her. Said it's become the highlight of her week." Another pause. "I'm glad she's finding ways to stay engaged with life." We were talking in code now, dancing around the truth that sat between us like a landmine. David thought he was being clever, but he was actually giving me exactly what I needed. Confirmation that this wasn't my imagination, wasn't a terrible misunderstanding that could be explained away. "I was thinking," I continued, "maybe we should plan something special for her birthday next month. Really celebrate how well she's doing." "Of course. Whatever you think would make her happy." I want it to be perfect. Maybe I should surprise her with something she's not expecting. This time the silence stretched longer. Surprises can be tricky. Maybe we should ask what she wants first. The code was becoming clearer. He was warning me away from spontaneous visits, from showing up unannounced, from disrupting their careful choreography. He thought he was protecting their secret, but he was actually teaching me how they operated. "You're probably right. I wouldn't want to catch her at a bad time." "Exactly. She values her privacy." After we hung up, I stared at the legal pad covered in my handwriting. at the timeline that revealed just how long and how carefully they'd been betraying me. This wasn't a moment of weakness that had spiraled out of control. This was a systematic affair conducted with the precision of a military operation. I needed proof, real proof, not just my word against theirs. They'd been so careful about covering their tracks that even now, knowing what I knew, I had no concrete evidence beyond what I'd witnessed that one night. If I confronted them without documentation, they could deny everything, claim I was having a breakdown, make me question my own sanity. The thought of becoming the crazy wife who imagined things that weren't there, who accused innocent people of elaborate conspiracies, made my stomach churn. I'd seen it happen to other women, watch them be dismissed and gaslit until they wondered if their own eyes could be trusted. I wouldn't let that happen to me. I drove to an electronics store across town, paying cash for a small digital recorder and a set of wireless cameras designed for home security. The teenager behind the counter explained how easy they were to use, how the cameras could be hidden almost anywhere and accessed remotely through a smartphone app. Setting up a security system? He asked as he rang up my purchases. Something like that. I want to keep an eye on things when I'm not around. These are perfect for that. Motion activated, night vision, crystal clear audio. You'll know everything that's happening. Everything that's happening. The phrase echoed in my mind as I drove home. Soon I would know everything, have documentation of their betrayal that couldn't be denied or explained away. The thought should have brought relief, but instead, it felt like preparing for surgery without anesthesia. David was in the shower when I got home, giving me time to hide the equipment in my dresser drawer beneath sweaters he never touched. I could hear him singing, actually singing, while hot water washed away whatever traces of my mother might still cling to his skin. The cheerful sound of his voice made me want to smash something. That evening, we had dinner at our kitchen table like we had hundreds of times before. David served the pasta he'd made, poured wine, asked about my day with the attentive interest of a husband who cared about his wife's life. It was a perfect performance of marital normalcy, and I found myself wondering if anything about our relationship had ever been real. I was thinking, he said, twirling linguine around his fork, maybe we should plan a vacation. Somewhere tropical, just the two of us. It's been a while since we had time alone together. The suggestion hit me like a physical blow. A romantic getaway while he was sleeping with my mother, planned with the same casual cruelty as everything else he'd done. That sounds nice. When were you thinking? Maybe next month? I could arrange some time off, and your mom seems to be doing so well lately. She won't need us checking on her as much. She won't need us checking on her because she'll have him whenever she wants him, I thought. The vacation wasn't about romance. It was about removing me from the equation so they could be together without the inconvenience of maintaining their charade. Where did you have in mind? Hawaii, maybe? That resort we looked at last year but never booked. The one with the private beach villas? That's the one. 2 weeks of just us. No distractions, no responsibilities. No witnesses, I translated silently. No chance of me discovering them because I'd be 3,000 miles away, swimming in crystal blue water while they made love in my childhood home. It sounds perfect, I said, and meant it. 2 weeks would give me time to gather all the evidence I needed, to plan my response without them suspecting anything was wrong. After dinner, David settled in front of the television while I cleaned the kitchen. The domestic routine felt like play acting now, like we were both reading from scripts we'd memorized years ago. He laughed at a commercial, called out commentary about the news, asked if I wanted popcorn. Normal husband behavior from a man who was systematically destroying our marriage. I excused myself early, claiming a headache, and went upstairs to plan my surveillance strategy. The cameras were smaller than I'd expected, no bigger than buttons, with magnetic backs that would attach to any metal surface. I studied the layout of Mom's house in my mind, thinking about sightlines and hiding spots, about where they'd be most likely to reveal themselves. The next morning, David left for work with a kiss on my cheek and a promise to call later. I waited exactly 30 minutes after his car disappeared around the corner, then drove to Mom's house with my equipment hidden in a shopping bag that also contained legitimate groceries. What a lovely surprise, Mom said, opening the door with the same radiant smile she'd worn the day before. 2 visits in 2 days. I'm spoiled. I brought ingredients for that chicken casserole you love. Thought I'd make it for you. You're such a thoughtful daughter. Come in, come in. I followed her into the kitchen, chatting about the recipe while my eyes cataloged potential camera locations. The kitchen overlooked the living room through a breakfast bar opening, giving a clear view of both spaces. A camera hidden on top of the refrigerator would capture most of the first floor activity. While Mom put away groceries, I pretended to reach for a cookbook on the high shelf above the refrigerator, using the motion to attach the first camera. It was invisible against the dark metal, just another shadow among the dust and forgotten items that accumulated in high places. I should check upstairs, I said casually. Make sure that window in the guest room is still sticking. You mentioned it last week. Oh, you don't need to worry about that. I had someone look at it. Someone. Not a handyman or a contractor. Just someone. I wondered if David had fixed it during one of his secret visits. If maintaining the house was part of his justification for the affair. Taking care of his wife's poor widowed mother. Being the helpful son-in-law even in betrayal. I'll just take a quick look anyway. You know how I worry. Upstairs, I moved quickly but carefully. The guest room camera went behind the curtain rod, angled to capture the hallway and the entrance to Mom's bedroom. The most important camera, the one that would document their most intimate moments, I placed on the bookshelf in her bedroom, hidden behind a picture frame that faced the bed. My hands shook as I positioned it, thinking about the recordings it would soon capture. Did I really want to see them together? Did I need that level of documentation, that visual proof of their betrayal? But I forced myself to continue because I knew that without undeniable evidence, they'd find a way to twist the truth, to make me the villain in a story where I was the victim. The final camera went in the living room, tucked behind a lamp where it could record their conversations. If they planned their deceptions verbally, if they talked about me or discussed how to maintain their lies, I wanted every word documented. Back in the kitchen, I spent 2 hours preparing the casserole while Mom sat at the breakfast bar, chatting about everything and nothing. She seemed genuinely happy to have my company, and I found myself wondering if this was how she'd always been, or if the affair had given her a new lightness, a sense of vitality that came from living dangerously. You seem different lately, I said, sliding the casserole into the oven. More relaxed. I've been working on letting go of some things. Your father always said I worried too much about what other people thought. What kind of things? She paused, considering her words carefully. Old ideas about what my life should look like, about what's appropriate for a woman my age. The euphemisms were becoming more transparent. She was talking about the affair without talking about it, testing how much she could reveal without giving herself away. Dad would want you to be happy, I said, watching her reaction. Yes, he would. He always said happiness was a choice, not something that happened to you. Some people might judge you for moving on so soon after his death. Her chin lifted defiantly. Some people don't understand that grief isn't a competition. There's no prize for suffering longer than anyone else. She was defending herself against critics who didn't exist yet, preparing arguments for when the truth eventually came out. The calculation behind it, the way she was already strategizing her public narrative, made me realize this affair wasn't just about passion or loneliness. It was about control, about taking something that belonged to me and making it hers. I stayed for 3 hours, establishing my innocence, creating an alibi for the surveillance equipment. When I finally left, Mom hugged me tighter than usual and told me she loved me with unusual emphasis. I love you too, Mom, I said, and meant it despite everything. That was perhaps the cruelest part of this whole situation. I still loved them both, even knowing what they were doing to me. The drive home gave me time to test the camera app on my phone. One by one, the feeds came online, showing clear views of Mom's house from multiple angles. The kitchen camera captured her moving around, putting away dishes and humming to herself. The living room camera showed her settling into her favorite chair with a book. Everything worked perfectly. By tonight, I'd have documentation of whatever happened when David made his inevitable visit. At home, I tried to maintain my normal routine, but concentration was impossible. I started 3 different household projects and abandoned them all, too restless to focus on anything but the feeds from Mom's house. Every few minutes, I checked my phone, watching her move through her day like an unwitting star in her own surveillance show. David called during his lunch break, as he did every day, asking about my morning and telling me about a difficult client meeting. His voice carried the same warmth it always had, the same affection that had convinced me I'd married my soulmate. Now I listened for lies beneath the love, for signs of the deception that had become his second language. "What are your plans for this afternoon?" he asked. "Probably just errands, maybe stop by the gym." "Sounds good. I might be a little late tonight. We're trying to close this deal, and you know how that goes." "Of course. Work comes first." "Not first," he corrected quickly. "You come first. Always." The lie was so smooth, so practiced, that I almost believed it myself. This was David's gift, the ability to make falsehoods sound like truth, to inject sincerity into deception, until even the deceiver started believing their own performance. "I love you," he said before hanging up. "I love you too," I replied automatically, though the words felt like ash in my mouth. The afternoon crawled by with painful slowness. I checked the cameras obsessively, watching Mom read, make tea, talk on the phone with what appeared to be normal conversations about normal things. At 4 o'clock, she went upstairs and spent an hour in what appeared to be preparation for something, or someone. She showered, did her hair, changed into a different dress. At 6:30, the motion sensors triggered on the front door camera. David's car pulled into the driveway, but he didn't use the front entrance. Instead, he walked around to the back of the house, entering through the kitchen door like someone who belonged there, someone who had his own key. I watched through the kitchen camera as he greeted my mother, not with the polite hug of a son-in-law, but with the intimate embrace of a lover. Their bodies fit together with the familiarity of practice, and when they kissed, it was with the passion of people who'd been thinking about this moment all day. The camera captured everything in crystal clear detail. The way his hands tangled in her hair, the way she pressed against him like she couldn't get close enough, the way they moved together toward the stairs with the urgency of people who'd been apart too long. I set the phone face down on my kitchen counter and walked to the bathroom, where I threw up everything I'd eaten that day. The intellectual knowledge that they were betraying me was nothing compared to the visceral reality of watching it happen. Seeing them together didn't just confirm their affair, it revealed the depth of their feelings for each other, the genuine intimacy that made their betrayal even more devastating. When I returned to the phone, they'd moved upstairs. The bedroom camera showed them on the bed where my father had slept for 35 years, where I'd curled up during thunderstorms as a child, where Mom had read me bedtime stories and promised me that good people were rewarded and love was sacred. I forced myself to watch, to document, to gather the evidence I'd need. But I also memorized every detail because I knew that someday, when they tried to minimize this or claim it meant nothing, I'd need to remember exactly how they looked at each other, how naturally they moved together, how completely they'd erased my existence from their world. They talked between kisses, their voices too low for the audio to capture clearly, but their body language spoke volumes. This wasn't guilt-ridden infidelity or stolen moments of weakness. This was love, or what they believed was love, conducted with the confidence of people who thought they deserved happiness regardless of who they destroyed to get it. I watched until I couldn't anymore, until the images burned themselves into my memory so completely that I knew I'd never be able to forget them. Then I put the phone in a drawer and sat in my living room, waiting for David to come home and lie to my face about where he'd been. He arrived at 9:30, using his key in the front door like a husband returning from work rather than a man returning from his mother-in-law's bed. I was sitting on the couch reading a book, the picture of domestic tranquility. "Sorry I'm so late," he said, leaning down to kiss the top of my head. "The deal took forever to finalize, but we got it done." I could smell my mother's perfume on his clothes, could see the slight redness around his lips that suggested recent kissing. But he delivered his lie with the same confidence he'd always shown, secure in the knowledge that his trusting wife would never question his word. "Congratulations on closing the deal," I said, looking up from my book with a smile. "I'm proud of you." "Thanks, babe. I'm going to grab a quick shower, then maybe we could watch a movie?" "That sounds perfect." He headed upstairs, and I listened to the water run while he washed away the evidence of his betrayal. When he came back down in his pajamas, hair damp and skin flushed from the hot water, he looked exactly like the man I'd fallen in love with 8 years ago. Same smile, same eyes, same hands that had once trembled when he proposed. We watched a romantic comedy, cuddled together on the couch like the happy couple we appeared to be. David laughed at the jokes, made comments about the plot, fed me popcorn like we were teenagers on a date. If I hadn't seen him with my mother 3 hours earlier, I would have believed completely in the reality of our marriage. "I love nights like this," he said during a quiet moment. His arm tightened around me. "Just us. No distractions." "Me too," I agreed, though I was thinking about how easy it was for him to compartmentalize, to switch between his two lives without apparent effort or remorse. When the movie ended, we went upstairs together. David brushed his teeth while I changed into pajamas, and we performed the bedtime routine we'd shared for years. But when he reached for me in the darkness, when he tried to make love to me with hands that had touched my mother and lips that had whispered her name, I couldn't pretend anymore. "I'm not feeling well," I said, turning away from him. "Maybe tomorrow." "Of course," he said, immediately concerned. "Do you need anything? Water? Medicine?" His solicitude felt like mockery. He was worried about my comfort while systematically destroying my life, tender with my body while betraying my heart. "I just need sleep." "Okay. I love you, Anna. I love you too." The lies came so easily now, rolling off our tongues like prayers we'd memorized but stopped believing. We lay side by side in our marriage bed, two people who'd promised to honor and cherish each other, both of us harboring secrets that would detonate our life together. But only one of us knew that the countdown had already begun. Over the next week, I established a pattern. Every day, I checked the cameras at random intervals, learning the rhythm of their affair. David visited Mom 3 or 4 times a week, always during hours when he was supposedly at work or handling business obligations. Their relationship had its own routine. He'd arrive through the back door, they'd spend time talking in the kitchen or living room before moving upstairs, and he'd leave before I expected him home. They were careful but not paranoid, comfortable in their deception because they had no reason to suspect surveillance. I watched them cook dinner together, laugh at inside jokes, plan future meetings with the casual efficiency of people who'd been together for months. The domesticity of it was almost worse than the passion. They weren't just having an affair, they were playing house in my childhood home. The audio quality wasn't perfect, but I caught fragments of conversation that revealed the scope of their planning. David was going to tell me he needed to travel more for work, creating cover for extended visits. Mom was considering selling the house and moving somewhere warmer, though they hadn't decided whether David would follow her or if they'd maintain a long-distance relationship. They talked about me sometimes, not with malice but with the patronizing sympathy reserved for inconvenient obstacles. I was the wife who didn't understand David's needs, the daughter who was too clingy and needed to build her own life. They genuinely seemed to believe they were the victims in this situation, star-crossed lovers kept apart by circumstances beyond their control. The evidence files on my phone grew larger each day. Videos, audio recordings, screenshots of text messages between them that I'd managed to capture when David left his phone unattended. I created a detailed timeline with supporting documentation, building a case that would be impossible to deny or explain away. But as the evidence mounted, so did my rage. This wasn't just infidelity. It was a complete reconstruction of reality, designed to exclude me from my own family. They'd stolen my marriage, my mother, and my history, replacing everything I'd believed about my life with elaborate fiction. The breaking point came on a Thursday evening when I watched David help Mom arrange flowers in the vase I'd given her for Mother's Day. They were creating new traditions together, making memories in spaces that belonged to my childhood, writing me out of the story of my own family. That night, as David slept peacefully beside me, probably dreaming about my mother, I made a decision. I was done gathering evidence, done documenting their betrayal, done playing the role of the oblivious wife. It was time to remind them that every action has consequences, and some betrayals demand a reckoning. I reached for my laptop and began typing, my fingers moving across the keyboard with the steady rhythm of someone who knew exactly what needed to be done. The document I created wasn't just a plan, it was a blueprint for justice, a careful accounting of how to dismantle a life built on lies. They thought they were so clever, so careful, so in control of their narrative. Tomorrow, they'd learn that the woman they'd underestimated had been watching, recording, and preparing for this moment. Tomorrow, their carefully constructed world would begin to collapse, and I'd be the one holding the sledgehammer. The plan crystallized in my mind like frost forming on a window, beautiful and devastating in its clarity. I wouldn't scream or cry or fall apart the way they probably expected. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me destroyed by their betrayal. Instead, I would dismantle their lies with the same methodical precision they'd used to construct them. Friday morning arrived gray and cold, matching my mood perfectly. David kissed me goodbye with his usual tenderness, promising to call during lunch, reminding me that he loved me. The routine of deception had become so natural to him that I wondered if he even remembered what truth felt like anymore. "Have a good day at work," I said, handing him his coffee travel mug like I had hundreds of times before. "You too, beautiful. What are your plans?" "Just the usual. Might visit Mom later." Something flickered across his face, too quick to interpret. "Tell her I said hello." "I will." After his car disappeared around the corner, I went upstairs and retrieved the burner phone I'd purchased the day before. My hands were steady as I scrolled through the contacts I'd programmed, each name representing a different piece of the puzzle I was about to reveal. The first call was to Mitchell & Associates, the private investigation firm I'd researched extensively. Rebecca Mitchell had 20 years of experience in matrimonial investigations and a reputation for discretion. "Ms. Mitchell, this is Anna Walsh. I'd like to schedule a consultation regarding some surveillance footage I've gathered." "Of course, Mrs. Walsh. Can you give me a brief overview of the situation?" "I have video evidence of my husband conducting an affair. I need someone to verify the authenticity of the recordings and help me understand my legal options." "How much footage are we talking about?" "Approximately 40 hours across multiple dates, with clear audio and visual documentation." There was a pause. "That's quite comprehensive. Did you gather this evidence yourself?" "I installed cameras in my mother's house with her permission. The lie came easily, a necessary fiction to protect myself legally." "I see. Can you come in this afternoon?" "Say, 2 o'clock?" "Perfect." The second call was to David's office. His secretary, Janet, had always liked me, and her voice brightened when she heard my name. "Anna, how lovely to hear from you. David's in a meeting right now, but I can have him call you back. Actually, I was hoping to plan a surprise for him. Could you help me with his schedule for next week?" "Oh, how romantic. What did you have in mind?" "I want to arrange something special for Wednesday evening. Maybe you could block out some time on his calendar? Make sure he doesn't book any late meetings." "Consider it done. He'll be free after 4 o'clock on Wednesday." "You're wonderful, Janet, and please don't mention this to him. I want it to be a complete surprise." Wednesday would give me 5 days to prepare, 5 days to set the stage for the revelation that would end their affair and my marriage simultaneously. The symmetry appealed to me. They'd been planning their deceptions for months, so I would plan my response with equal care. The third call was the most difficult. I dialed Mom's number and listened to it ring, knowing that in a few days, this might be the last time we spoke as mother and daughter. "Anna, sweetheart, I was just thinking about you." "Hi, Mom. I wanted to invite you to dinner on Wednesday night. David and I are planning something special, and we'd love to have you join us." "How wonderful. What's the occasion?" "It's a surprise. Can you be here around 6? "Of course. Should I bring anything?" "Just yourself. We'll take care of everything else." "I'm so excited. It's been too long since we had a proper family dinner." Family dinner? The words tasted like poison, but I forced myself to maintain the cheerful tone. "It'll be perfect, Mom. Everything will finally be out in the open." After hanging up, I sat in my kitchen and allowed myself exactly 5 minutes to grieve. 5 minutes to mourn the mother I'd lost, the marriage that had never really existed, the family that had been built on foundations of sand. Then I dried my eyes and got back to work. The appointment with Rebecca Mitchell went exactly as I'd hoped. She reviewed the footage with professional detachment, occasionally making notes or asking technical questions about camera placement and audio quality. Her face remained neutral throughout, but I caught her wincing slightly when David and Mom appeared together in the bedroom footage. "This is certainly comprehensive," she said finally, closing her laptop. "The quality is excellent, and the timestamps provide a clear timeline of the affair. From a legal standpoint, this constitutes ironclad evidence of adultery. What are my options?" "That depends on what you want to achieve. Are you planning to file for divorce?" "I haven't decided yet. Right now, I just want them to understand that their actions have consequences." Rebecca leaned back in her chair, studying my face with the sharp intelligence that had made her reputation. "Mrs. Walsh, I've been doing this for 20 years, and I can tell when someone is planning more than just a divorce. What exactly are you thinking?" I considered how much to reveal, then decided honesty was the best policy. I want to confront them both simultaneously. I want them to see exactly what I know and understand that their careful planning wasn't as careful as they thought. A controlled revelation. That can be effective, but it can also be dangerous. Cornered people sometimes react unpredictably. They're not dangerous people. They're selfish and dishonest, but they're not violent. Even so, I'd recommend having a witness present, someone neutral, who can verify what happens during the confrontation. What did you have in mind? I could be there if you'd like. As a professional observer, it would protect you legally and ensure there are no false accusations later. The idea had merit. Having a private investigator present would add weight to my evidence and prevent David and Mom from claiming I'd somehow fabricated everything. How much would that cost? For you? No charge. This case has piqued my professional interest, and I'd like to see how it plays out. We shook hands on the arrangement, and I left her office feeling more confident about Wednesday's plan. Everything was falling into place, with the kind of precision that felt almost predetermined, like the universe was finally balancing accounts that had been overdue for too long. The weekend passed in a blur of domestic normalcy that felt increasingly surreal. David and I grocery shopped together, watched movies, made love with what seemed like genuine passion. He was either an extraordinary actor or had developed the ability to completely compartmentalize his double life. I found myself studying his face during quiet moments, looking for signs of guilt or conflict, but found nothing except the familiar features of the man I'd once trusted completely. Saturday evening, we had dinner with friends at their house, playing the role of the happy couple with practiced ease. David told charming stories about work, complimented my dress, held my hand during the car ride home. To any observer, we were the picture of marital contentment. "I love nights like this," he said as we got ready for bed. "Just being normal, you know. Sometimes I feel like we get so caught up in the day-to-day stress that we forget to just enjoy being together." The irony was so thick I could taste it, but I nodded and smiled and told him I felt the same way. We were both living in alternate realities now, mine built on knowledge and his on denial, but somehow we were still going through the motions of marriage like dancers following familiar choreography. Sunday brought the usual visit to Mom's house, but this time I went alone. David claimed he had work to catch up on, which I knew meant he was planning to visit her later, when I wouldn't be there to witness their reunion. "You seem different lately," Mom said as we sat in her living room, the same room where I'd watched them embrace through hidden cameras just days before. "Different how? Calmer, maybe? More settled, like you figured something out that was bothering you." The observation was unsettling in its accuracy. I did feel calmer, more settled, now that I had a plan. The chaos of discovery had given way to the focused energy of someone who knew exactly what needed to be done. "I've been doing some thinking about family," I said carefully. "About what it means to really know the people you love." "That's very wise. People aren't always what they seem on the surface." "No, they're not. Sometimes the people closest to you are capable of things you never imagined." Mom's eyes sharpened slightly, as if she was trying to determine whether my words carried hidden meaning. "That's true. People are complex. They can surprise you." "They certainly can." We were dancing around the edges of truth, each of us probing to see how much the other knew or suspected. But I had the advantage of certainty while she only had paranoia, and I was careful not to reveal my hand too early. Monday and Tuesday crawled by with agonizing slowness. I went through the motions of normal life, while internally rehearsing Wednesday's confrontation, refining my approach, anticipating their reactions. David maintained his usual routine, calling during lunch, coming home at reasonable hours, being the attentive husband he'd always appeared to be. Tuesday evening, he mentioned that he might be a little late Wednesday because of a client meeting that had been rescheduled. How late? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Maybe 7 or 8. Nothing too dramatic. That's fine, Mom's coming for dinner anyway, so I'll have company. Perfect. You two can catch up while I finish work. The casual way he said it, the complete lack of irony or guilt, confirmed that he had no idea his carefully constructed world was about to implode. He genuinely believed he was in control of the situation, that his lies were seamless, that his wife was too trusting and naive to ever discover the truth. Wednesday morning arrived crisp and clear, the kind of autumn day that made everything look sharp and defined. David left for work with his usual kiss and promised to call later, and I watched him drive away, knowing it would be the last time he left our house as my unsuspecting husband. I spent the morning preparing for the evening with the thoroughness of a general planning a battle. The dining room was cleaned and arranged to accommodate not just dinner but a presentation. I set up my laptop at one end of the table, connected to the large monitor we usually used for movie nights. The surveillance footage was organized into a comprehensive timeline, ready to be displayed in chronological order. Rebecca Mitchell arrived at 3 o'clock, carrying a briefcase and wearing the kind of neutral business attire that suggested professional competence without intimidation. "How are you feeling about tonight?" she asked as I showed her around the house. "Nervous, excited, terrified, all of the above." That's normal. Confronting betrayal is never easy, even when you have overwhelming evidence. "Do you think they'll deny it? Even with video proof?" People will deny anything when they're cornered. They might claim the footage is fake, or that you're having a breakdown, or that what they're doing isn't really an affair. Be prepared for them to attack your credibility rather than defend their actions. I'm ready for that. Good. Remember, the goal isn't to get them to admit their guilt. The goal is to make sure they understand that you know the truth and that their lies are over. At 5:30, I started cooking dinner. Nothing elaborate, just the kind of meal I'd prepared hundreds of times for family gatherings. The irony of creating a last supper for my marriage wasn't lost on me, but I found the familiar rhythms of cooking oddly soothing. Mom arrived exactly at 6, carrying a bottle of wine and wearing a dress I'd never seen before. She looked younger somehow, more vibrant, glowing with the kind of happiness that came from having a secret that made her feel special. "Something smells wonderful," she said, kissing my cheek. "Where's David?" "Running a little late. Work crisis, you know how it is." "Of course. He works so hard. You're lucky to have such a dedicated husband." The comment hit like a physical blow, but I managed to maintain my composure. "I am lucky. David is very dedicated to the things he cares about." We chatted about inconsequential things while I finished preparing dinner, both of us performing the roles of loving mother and dutiful daughter while harboring secrets that would destroy our relationship forever. The normalcy of it felt like a fever dream, like we were actors in a play that was about to take a dramatic turn. At 7:15, David's car pulled into the driveway. Through the window, I watched him sit in the driver's seat for a moment, probably composing himself, transitioning from lover back to husband. The calculation involved in that moment of preparation made my stomach turn. He entered through the front door with his usual cheerful greeting, kissing me and hugging Mom like the perfect family man he appeared to be. "Sorry I'm late. The clients were impossible today." "No problem," I said. "We're just getting started." "Great. I'm starving." We sat down to dinner like we had dozens of times before. David and Mom chatting easily about current events, the weather, neighborhood gossip. They were so comfortable with each other, so natural in their interactions, that anyone watching would assume they'd always had this kind of warm relationship. But I was watching for different things now. The way David's eyes lingered on Mom when she laughed. The way she unconsciously leaned toward him when he spoke. The small, intimate smiles they shared when they thought I wasn't looking. Every gesture confirmed what I already knew while adding new layers of betrayal to the foundation of evidence I'd built. Halfway through the main course, I put down my fork and cleared my throat. I invited you both here tonight because there's something important we need to discuss. David's attention sharpened. What's going on? You sound serious. I am serious. Very serious. Mom reached across the table and patted my hand. Whatever it is, sweetheart, we're here for you. The gesture that was meant to be comforting felt like a mockery, and I had to resist the urge to pull my hand away. Actually, Mom, this is about what you're here for. What you've both been here for. A look passed between them, quick and worried, confirming that they understood my words carried hidden meaning. Anna, David said carefully, what exactly are you talking about? Instead of answering, I stood and walked to the laptop I'd positioned at the end of the table. Rebecca Mitchell, who had been waiting quietly in the living room, appeared in the doorway with her briefcase. David, Mom, I'd like you to meet Rebecca Mitchell. She's a private investigator who's been helping me with a little project. The color drained from both their faces simultaneously, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. Anna, Mom said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. What is this about? This is about truth, I said, opening the laptop and connecting it to the monitor. About the difference between what you've been telling me and what you've actually been doing. The first image appeared on the screen. David's car in Mom's driveway, time-stamped 3 days earlier. Both of them stared at it like they were seeing a ghost. For the past 2 weeks, I continued, my voice steady and calm, I've been documenting your relationship. Every visit, every conversation, every intimate moment. I have approximately 40 hours of footage showing exactly what my husband and my mother do when they think no one is watching. David started to stand, but I held up a hand to stop him. Sit down, David. We're just getting started. The next image showed them embracing in Mom's kitchen, followed by footage of them climbing the stairs together, their bodies pressed close with unmistakable intimacy. Please, Mom whispered, tears starting to form in her eyes. Anna, let me explain. Explain what, exactly? Explain how you decided that sleeping with your daughter's husband was acceptable? Explain how you justified betraying the person who loved you most in the world? I clicked to the next video, this one showing them in bed together, their faces clearly visible, their actions undeniably intimate. Or maybe you'd like to explain this, David. How you kiss my mother with the same lips that tell me you love me. How you hold her with the same hands that promise to cherish only me. David's mouth opened and closed soundlessly, but no words came out. Mom had buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. The really interesting part, I continued, advancing through the timeline with clinical precision, is how long this has been going on. Based on the evidence I've gathered, your affair started approximately 8 months ago. 8 months of lies, 8 months of betrayal, 8 months of treating me like an inconvenient obstacle to your happiness. Rebecca stepped forward, her professional demeanor adding weight to the moment. Mrs. Walsh has documented a comprehensive pattern of deception, she said, her voice neutral but authoritative. The evidence is unambiguous and legally admissible. Legally admissible? David's voice cracked on the words. In divorce proceedings, yes. Also potentially relevant in other legal contexts, depending on how Mrs. Walsh chooses to proceed. I let the implications of that statement sink in before continuing. Here's what's going to happen, I said, closing the laptop with a sharp click. You're both going to sit there and listen while I explain exactly how this is going to play out. No interruptions, no explanations, no excuses. You've had 8 months to tell me the truth, and you chose lies instead. Now it's my turn to talk. The silence that followed was so complete I could hear the wall clock ticking, the refrigerator humming, the sound of my own heartbeat in my ears. David, you're going to pack a bag tonight and leave this house. You can stay wherever you want. A hotel, a friend's house, or maybe Mom's place, since you're so comfortable there. But you're not sleeping in my bed anymore. Anna, please. I said no interruptions. You'll also be calling your lawyer first thing tomorrow morning, because I'm filing for divorce. No negotiations, no attempts at reconciliation, No begging for another chance. 8 months of lies doesn't get forgiven with an apology. David's face had gone completely white, but he remained silent. Mom, you and I are done. Not just for now, not until things cool down, but forever. You chose my husband over your daughter, and that's a choice you get to live with for the rest of your life. But I'm your mother, she whispered, her voice broken and desperate. A mother doesn't sleep with her daughter's husband. A mother doesn't participate in the systematic destruction of her child's marriage. A mother doesn't smile and accept anniversary cakes while conducting an affair in the bed where her husband died. The reference to Dad's bed hit her like a physical blow, and she made a sound that was half gasp, half sob. You want to know the worst part? I continued, my voice gaining strength with each word. It wasn't just the betrayal. It was the way you both treated me, like I was stupid, like I was so naive and trusting that I'd never figure it out. You made jokes about me, planned around me, managed me like an inconvenient detail in your love story. I stood and walked to the window, looking out at the neighborhood where I'd built what I thought was a life. But here's what you both failed to understand. I'm not the victim in this story anymore. I'm not the naive wife or the trusting daughter. I'm the woman who outsmarted both of you, who documented your lies, who's about to take control of a situation you thought you were managing. When I turned back to face them, Rebecca was taking notes, documenting everything for her report. The evidence I've gathered will be shared with my lawyer, David's employer, and anyone else who needs to understand exactly what kind of people you are. Your affair isn't a secret anymore, it's a matter of public record. My job? David's voice was barely audible. Your company has a strict morality clause in their employment contracts. I checked. Adultery reflects poorly on their family values brand. The full scope of the consequences was starting to dawn on him, and I could see panic replacing shock in his eyes. As for you, Mom, I've already spoken to your neighbors, your book club, your bridge partners. They're all very interested in hearing about your new relationship with your son-in-law. That wasn't entirely true, but the threat served its purpose. Mom's face went even whiter, if that was possible. You've destroyed everything, I said finally, my voice carrying the weight of absolute finality. Your affair, your lies, your complete disregard for anyone but yourselves. You've destroyed our family, our relationships, our future. But you haven't destroyed me. I walked back to the table and stood behind my chair, looking down at the two people who had once been the most important parts of my world. I want both of you out of my house in the next hour. Take whatever you can carry, and don't come back. Don't call, don't text, don't send letters or flowers or apologies. We're done. Forever. Rebecca closed her briefcase with a decisive snap that sounded like a gavel falling. I believe my work here is finished, she said. Mrs. Walsh, you have my card if you need anything else. After she left, the three of us sat in silence, while the weight of the revelation settled around us like dust after an explosion. David was staring at his hands, his face a mask of shock and disbelief. Mom was crying quietly, mascara running down her cheeks in dark streams. Finally, David looked up at me with eyes that seemed to have aged years in the past hour. Anna, I know you don't want to hear this, but I need you to know that what happened between your mother and me, it wasn't planned. It wasn't something we intended. I don't care about your intentions, I care about your actions. But we never meant to hurt you. We tried to stay away from each other, tried to fight it, but you didn't try hard enough, did you? You chose your feelings over my marriage, your happiness over my family. Mom finally spoke, her voice thick with tears. Anna, please, you're my daughter. Nothing will ever change that. You changed it. The moment you decided my husband was more important than my heart, you stopped being my mother. They made a few more attempts to explain, to justify, to minimize what they'd done, but I'd heard enough. The time for explanations had passed along with their right to my forgiveness. David packed a suitcase with the mechanical movements of someone in shock, while Mom gathered her purse and coat with hands that shook so badly she could barely manage the simple tasks. Neither of them seemed to know what to say, how to end this, how to walk away from the wreckage they'd created. At the front door, David turned back one last time. I did love you, Anna. I still do. No, I said, my hand on the door handle. You loved the idea of me. You loved having a wife who trusted you completely, who never questioned your lies, who made your deception possible. But you never loved me enough to be honest, and that's not love at all. Mom tried to hug me, but I stepped back, keeping the distance between us that would now be permanent. Take care of yourself, Mom. I hope your new life with David is everything you thought it would be when you were planning it in Dad's bed. The cruelty of the words wasn't lost on me, but cruelty seemed appropriate given the circumstances. They'd shown me no mercy. I owed them none in return. I closed the door behind them and stood in my empty house, listening to their cars drive away. The silence was different now. Not the oppressive quiet of secrets and lies, but the peaceful stillness of truth finally revealed. I poured myself a glass of wine and sat in my living room, surrounded by the remnants of a life I'd thought was real. Tomorrow would bring lawyers and paperwork, the practical business of dismantling a marriage and starting over. But tonight was for reflection, for processing, for acknowledging that while I'd lost everything I thought I wanted, I'd gained something far more valuable. I'd gained myself back. For the first time in 8 months, I was the only person in my house who knew the truth about my life. There were no hidden agendas, no secret meetings, no lies disguised as love. Just me, my wine, and the satisfaction of knowing that justice, when it finally came, was worth the wait. Outside, the neighborhood settled into its evening routine, unaware that behind one set of windows, a woman had just reclaimed her life from the people who'd stolen it. The house felt larger without their deception filling it, cleaner without their betrayal poisoning the air. I raised my wine glass in a solitary toast to the empty room. To new beginnings, I said aloud, my voice strong and clear in the silence. And to the end of believing in fairy tales. The wine tasted like freedom, and for the first time in longer than I could remember, I slept through the night without checking my phone, without worrying about someone else's emergency, without calculating the cost of someone else's happiness. I slept like a woman who had finally learned the difference between love and lies, between family and exploitation, between forgiveness and justice. And in the morning I would wake up free. 3 months later, I stood in the kitchen of my new apartment, making coffee for one, and watching the sunrise paint the city skyline in shades of gold and pink. The view from my 20th floor window was nothing like the suburban landscape I'd called home for 8 years, but it was mine in a way that previous life had never been. The divorce papers had been finalized the week before, a surprisingly swift process given David's complete lack of resistance. He'd signed everything without argument, probably grateful that I hadn't pursued the more vindictive options my lawyer had suggested. The house had sold quickly in the competitive market, and my half of the proceeds had been enough to start fresh somewhere new, somewhere without memories lurking in every corner. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah, my lawyer. Settlement check cleared. Congratulations on your new beginning. The money from David's buyout of my portion of his business had been substantial, a final irony that his success was now funding my independence. His company had indeed terminated his employment once the surveillance footage made its way to human resources, though they'd been discreet about the reasons. Corporate morality clauses were useful things when properly applied. I'd changed everything about my life that could be changed. New city, new apartment, new job with a financial consulting firm that valued my analytical skills and attention to detail. New phone number, new email address, new social media accounts that didn't contain any traces of my previous existence. I'd even changed my name back to my maiden name, shedding the last vestige of my connection to David Walsh. The woman who had discovered her husband and mother's betrayal that night felt like someone I'd known in another lifetime. That woman had been naive enough to believe that love guaranteed honesty, that family bonds were unbreakable, that good intentions were enough to protect you from harm. This woman knew better. I'd heard through mutual friends that David and Mom had tried to make their relationship work after everything exploded. They'd moved in together for a few weeks, playing house in the shadow of their exposed affair. But love built on betrayal apparently wasn't as solid as they'd imagined. Without the thrill of secrecy and the shared conspiracy against me, they discovered they had little in common beyond their willingness to hurt someone they claimed to care about. David had moved to another state last month, chasing a job opportunity that probably had more to do with escaping the social consequences of his choices than career advancement. Our former neighbors had been politely but thoroughly scandalized by the whole situation, and suburban gossip networks had long memories. Mom had sold Dad's house and moved to a retirement community in Florida, claiming she needed a fresh start somewhere warm. I had heard this secondhand from my aunt, the only family member who still spoke to both of us, though she made it clear she wasn't playing messenger service. Some bridges once burned can't be rebuilt, she'd told me with characteristic bluntness. But some bridges needed burning anyway. The surveillance equipment I'd used to document their affair now sat in a box in my closet, a reminder of how far I'd been willing to go to uncover the truth. I kept it not out of nostalgia but as a monument to my own resourcefulness, proof that I was capable of more strategic thinking than anyone had given me credit for, including myself. My new life wasn't without its challenges. Starting over at 34 meant rebuilding everything from scratch. Friendships, routines, professional relationships, even basic things like finding a good grocery store or a reliable dry cleaner. Some days, the weight of all that newness felt overwhelming, like I was an actor trying to memorize an entirely different role. But there were unexpected gifts in the rebuilding. Without David's preferences influencing my choices, I discovered that I actually preferred living in the city to the suburbs, that I enjoyed the energy and anonymity of urban life. Without the obligation of weekly dinners with Mom, I'd found time to pursue interests I'd abandoned years ago. I joined a book club, started taking photography classes, even signed up for cooking lessons that focused on cuisines David had never wanted to try. The photography class had been particularly therapeutic. Something about capturing moments of truth through a lens appealed to me, the way light and shadow could reveal or conceal, depending on your perspective. My instructor, Marcus, was a kind man in his 50s who'd complimented my eye for detail and suggested I consider it more than just a hobby. "You have a talent for seeing what others miss," he'd said after reviewing my portfolio of street photography. "That's not something that can be taught." The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd spent 8 years missing the most important deception in my own life, but apparently I was skilled at capturing truth when I looked for it through a camera lens. Perhaps that was the difference. When you were looking through a viewfinder, you expected to find stories, secrets, moments of revelation. In marriage, I'd made the mistake of expecting honesty by default. My dating life was non-existent by choice. Well-meaning friends had tried to set me up with colleagues or introduce me to single men at social gatherings, but I'd politely declined every opportunity. The idea of trusting someone with my heart again felt premature at best, impossible at worst. I was still learning how to trust my own judgment about people, still recalibrating my ability to distinguish between genuine affection and skilled performance. "You can't let what they did stop you from finding real love," my friend Jennifer had argued over lunch the previous week. "Not everyone is like David and your mother." "I know that intellectually," I'd replied, cutting my salad into precise pieces. "But knowing something and feeling it are different things. I'm not ready to risk being wrong about someone again." What if you're wrong about being wrong? What if you pass up something wonderful because you're too scared to try? It was a fair question, but I wasn't ready for fair questions about love yet. I was still processing unfair answers about betrayal, still working through the implications of having my entire understanding of human nature upended in a single evening. Therapy had helped, though it had taken me 3 tries to find the right counselor. The first one had wanted to focus on forgiveness and healing, concepts that felt premature when I was still processing the scope of the damage. The second had been too eager to pathologize my response, suggesting that my methodical approach to exposing the affair indicated trust issues that predated the betrayal. Dr. Ellen Hartman, my current therapist, understood that sometimes anger was appropriate, that strategic thinking wasn't pathological, and that forgiveness was a choice rather than an obligation. She'd helped me understand that my response to discovering the affair had been both rational and proportionate, that protecting myself wasn't the same as seeking revenge. "You documented evidence and used it to make informed decisions about your future," she'd said during one of our sessions. "That's not vindictive behavior. That's self-preservation guided by intelligence. Sometimes I wonder if I should have tried to work things out with them. If I gave up too easily. Do you really believe that, or do you think you're supposed to believe that? The distinction had been revelatory. I didn't actually want to reconcile with David or Mom. I wanted to want to, because that seemed like what a good person would do. But wanting to forgive wasn't the same as being required to forgive. And healing didn't necessarily include reconciliation. The hardest part of moving forward hadn't been the practical challenges of divorce and relocation. It had been learning to trust my own perceptions again, to believe that what I observed was real rather than questioning whether I was seeing things that weren't there or missing things that were. The surveillance footage had been both blessing and curse in that regard. It provided undeniable proof that I wasn't imagining things, wasn't overreacting, wasn't being paranoid or unreasonable. But it also meant I'd seen things I could never unsee, witnessed intimacies that would be burned into my memory forever. Some nights I still woke up with images from those recordings, playing in my mind like a film reel I couldn't turn off. David's hands in Mom's hair. The way they laughed together in her kitchen. The casual domestic intimacy they'd shared while I was at work, unknowingly funding their affair through the joint account that paid for her groceries and his gas. But those midnight moments of pain were becoming less frequent, the sharp edges of betrayal slowly wearing smooth through time and distance. I was learning that healing wasn't linear, that progress came in waves rather than steady forward motion, that some days I felt strong and others I felt like I was starting from zero again. The financial settlement had given me freedom I'd never expected. David's guilt and desire for a quick resolution had made him generous in ways that surprised everyone, including his own lawyer. My portion of the business sale, combined with his buyout of my share of the house and the spousal support he'd agreed to pay, meant I could take time to figure out what I actually wanted to do with my life, rather than just what I needed to do to survive. For the first time since college, I had the luxury of choice. I could stay in consulting, which paid well and utilized my skills, or I could pursue something entirely different. The photography classes had sparked an interest in visual storytelling that felt both familiar and new. There was something appealing about the idea of making a living by capturing truth rather than untangling lies. My phone rang, interrupting my morning contemplation. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, but the area code was familiar. It was from my old hometown. For a moment, my heart raced with the possibility that it was David or Mom, somehow tracking down my new number despite all my precautions. Hello? Anna? Anna Chen? This is Margaret Sullivan. I hope you don't mind me calling. Margaret had been my next-door neighbor for 6 years. A kind woman in her 70s who'd always been friendly but never intrusive. I couldn't imagine why she'd be calling me now. Margaret, what a surprise! How did you get this number? Your friend Jennifer gave it to me. I hope that's all right. I wouldn't have called except... Well, there's something I think you should know. My stomach tightened with familiar anxiety. What is it? It's about your mother's house. The new owners found something when they were renovating the master bedroom. Hidden behind a loose baseboard. They brought it to me because they knew we'd been neighbors. What kind of something? Letters. A whole bundle of them, tied with a ribbon. They're addressed to you, Anna. From your father. The words hit me like a physical blow, and I had to sit down on my kitchen stool to keep from falling. From Dad? But that's impossible. He died 3 years ago. The dates on the letters go back to when he was first diagnosed. It looks like he was writing to you throughout his illness, maybe planning to give them to you later. But they never got mailed, and your mother must have hidden them after he passed. I closed my eyes, trying to process this information. Dad had written me letters during the last months of his life, letters that Mom had found and hidden instead of giving to me. The betrayal felt fresh and raw, like discovering the affair all over again. Margaret, I don't know what to say. The new owners want to return them to you. They seem like lovely people, very respectful about the whole situation. Would you like me to have them mailed to you, or... No, I said quickly. I'll come get them. When would be convenient? Anytime, dear. I'm always home these days. After hanging up, I sat in my kitchen for a long time, staring out at the city skyline while my coffee grew cold. The idea that Dad had written me letters, that he'd had final words or thoughts he'd wanted to share, felt like a gift from beyond the grave. But the knowledge that Mom had hidden them had robbed me of whatever comfort or closure they might have provided during my grief, added another layer to her betrayal. I booked a flight for the following weekend, telling myself I was only going to collect the letters and leave. I wouldn't drive by the old house, wouldn't visit familiar places, wouldn't risk running into anyone who might want to discuss the dramatic end of my marriage. This would be a quick trip focused solely on retrieving something that should have been mine years ago. But as the plane descended toward the airport I'd flown out of so many times before, I felt a mixture of anticipation and dread that reminded me why I'd moved so far away in the first place. Some places held too many memories to be neutral, too much history to be visited casually. Margaret greeted me at her front door with the kind of warm hug that made me realize how much I'd missed having people in my life who'd known me before everything fell apart. She looked older than I remembered, more fragile, but her eyes were as sharp and kind as they'd always been. "You look wonderful, dear," she said, leading me into her living room. "Different, but wonderful. Stronger, maybe." "Thank you. It's good to see you, too." She handed me a manila envelope that felt surprisingly heavy in my hands. "The letters are all there." I didn't read them, of course, but the new owners said there were about 20 of them. 20 letters. 20 pieces of communication from my father that I'd never received, thoughts and feelings that Mom had decided I didn't deserve to know. The weight of that deception settled in my chest like a stone. "Margaret, can I ask you something? Did you ever suspect that anything was going on between David and my mother, before everything came out?" She was quiet for a moment, considering her words carefully. "I wondered sometimes. David's car was there so often, especially after your father passed. More often than seemed necessary for just checking on her. But I never imagined anything like what actually happened." "Did other people notice?" "A few. There was some talk. But you know how neighborhood gossip can be. People see patterns and make assumptions, but no one wants to be the one to make accusations without proof. So others had seen what I'd missed. The signs had been visible enough for neighbors to notice and discuss, but I'd been too trusting, too willing to believe innocent explanations for suspicious behavior. "I should have paid more attention," I said. "Oh, honey, no. You shouldn't blame yourself for not expecting the people you loved to betray you. That's not a failure on your part. That's a failure on theirs." Margaret's words echoed what Dr. Hartman had told me, but hearing them from someone who'd witnessed the situation firsthand carried additional weight. I wasn't the naive fool I sometimes worried I'd been. I'd been a trusting wife and daughter, and there was nothing wrong with that until the people I trusted proved unworthy of it. I drove to a coffee shop across town to read Dad's letters, needing neutral territory for whatever revelations they might contain. The first letter was dated just 2 weeks after his cancer diagnosis, written in his familiar handwriting, though already shakier than I remembered. "My dearest Anna," it began, "if you're reading this, it means I'm no longer with you, and there are things I wanted to say that I couldn't find the words for while I was fighting this disease. I hope your mother gave these to you when you were ready to receive them, when the grief had softened enough to make room for the love they contain. He'd known Mom would be the one to decide when I received his letters. He'd trusted her to honor his wishes, to give me his final thoughts when she judged the time was right. The betrayal of that trust felt almost as devastating as the affair itself. The letters covered everything: his pride in the woman I'd become, his gratitude for the joy I'd brought to his life, his hopes for my future, his concerns about leaving Mom alone. In one letter, he wrote about David with warmth and approval. "He makes you happy in a way that lights up your whole face. Hold on to that happiness, sweetheart. It's rarer and more precious than you know." Reading Dad's endorsement of my marriage while knowing how it had ended felt like a cruel joke. He'd died believing David was the right man for me, never suspecting that within months of his funeral, his approved son-in-law would be sleeping with his widow. The later letters, written as his condition worsened, contained more personal reflections. He wrote about his own marriage to Mom, about the challenges they'd faced and overcome, about his certainty that their love would survive, even his death. "Your mother and I built something real," he'd written in one of the final letters. "Something that will outlast my physical presence because it's rooted in respect and genuine partnership. I know she'll grieve, but I also know she'll find her way back to happiness eventually. She has too much life in her to stay sad forever." He'd expected Mom to find new love eventually, but he'd envisioned her finding it with someone appropriate, someone who wouldn't destroy our family in the process. The dramatic irony of his expectations versus reality made me want to laugh and cry simultaneously. The last letter was different from the others, more urgent in tone despite being written in handwriting so shaky it was barely legible. "Anna, there's something I need you to know about trust. I've spent my life believing that people are fundamentally good, that love conquers most problems, that if you treat people with kindness and respect, they'll return the same. I still believe those things, but I've learned that they're not universal laws. Some people are broken in ways that make them incapable of returning the love they receive. Some people will take your trust and use it as a weapon against you. If you ever find yourself in a situation where someone's actions don't match their words, believe their actions. Always believe their actions. Love is not enough to fix someone who doesn't want to be fixed, and trust is not a gift you have to keep giving to people who've proven they don't deserve it." The letter felt prophetic, like Dad had somehow sensed that I'd need this specific advice someday. Maybe his illness had given him clarity about human nature that health had obscured. Or maybe he'd observed things about the people around him that he'd chosen not to address while he was alive. I sat in the coffee shop for 3 hours, reading through all 20 letters twice, absorbing Dad's final thoughts, and realizing how much wisdom had been stolen from me by Mom's deception. These letters could have helped me process my grief, could have provided comfort during the darkest days after his funeral, could have given me perspective that might have helped me recognize the warning signs of my crumbling marriage. But they also provided something I hadn't expected: